and welcome to Wrap. My name is Emily Baltz. I'm your host for this 8-week residency in the storefront window of the DKNY shop at 420 West Broadway in New York City. Over these 2 months, I'm interviewing contemporary female artists living and working in New York City about their recipes for art and process. That's what WRAP stands for, Women, Recipes, Art, and Process. And today I have the awesome honor of sitting next to the excellent Leigh Silverman, who is an American director for the stage, helming over 30 plays for Broadway, off-Broadway, and around the country. She was the youngest woman ever to direct on Broadway when she made her debut in 2006. Silverman was nominated for a Tony Award in 2014 for Best Direction of a Musical for her production of Violet. Currently, she is rehearsing a revival of Sweet Charity starring Sutton Foster and her production of Neil LaBute's new play, All the Ways to Say I Love You, starring Judith Light, and that has extended twice. Silverman received a joint degree in directing and playwriting from Carnegie Mellon University. Congratulations, Leigh.
Thanks.
Before we turned the camera on, you were telling me you have this incredible linear path, and I was telling you about my incredibly circuitous path.
And which sounded so amazing.
I think to each their own, I suppose.
I guess, yeah.
But tell me what sort of launched you on this path and how you came to directing and playwriting.
I mean, I was a theater nerd always and loved theater and I'm an only child, and I think I had a crazy imagination and was also very bossy, and those things.
That's what it takes to be a director.
Yeah, that's it. And luckily, somebody told me when I think I was like 14 or 15, they said, "Oh, Leigh, you're very smart, but you're a terrible actress." And that was actually great because then I was lucky enough that same person said, you know, I want you to assist me and help me work on these scenes with these other people. And she handed me Shakespeare and Chekhov and Ibsen and all these incredible writers, and I spent the summer assisting her as she directed all these scenes, and that was it. I was like, I want to be a director, and it was kind of the best thing. I mean, as many things in life, I feel like, you know, hand in hand with success comes humiliation. So so that's a little bit what that was like. And then from then on, I've just been aiming myself towards being a theater director.
Yeah. What drew you specifically to theater over other forms? I mean, there's obviously the entire direction of film directing, but what is it about theater that sparks your interest?
To me, there's something just about storytelling in a room where we're all in that room together and figuring out how to create exciting and theatrical things that can only happen live, that can't happen in film or on television. That challenge always felt the most interesting to me, and it always felt the most complicated in a way. And I just was like, I need to go there. You know, oh, that seems hard and complicated. I don't know. That was but you went right. You were really drawn to film.
I was drawn to film first. Yeah. Well,
how come?
I think for 2 reasons. I studied dance and screenwriting, and they were both, I think, trying to merge this form of live storytelling. But I think I've always been interested in the image or the two-dimensional plane coming alive. That kind of surprise is something I knew that film was interesting for me. It also I'll maybe tell the secret, is that it might have been like another level of control.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
sure.
Theater is like still at heart improvisational.
Yeah. And
you're dealing with screw-ups and failures and all sorts of things.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like so much of theater is figuring out, okay, what is it going to feel like, and within a certain set of boundaries, and then you have whatever happens that night with that audience, with those people, how people are feeling, and you hopefully as a director have built a structure that's sound enough that it can withstand any number of distractions, anything from a cell phone to what's happening in the world at that moment that affects and changes what happens in theater. And I think it's one of the great things about theater, in fact, is that you have to include everything and everyone that's happening in that room at that moment.
Oh, interesting. And in your process, how do you go about doing that? Because I think, in my experience, there's obviously a classical, you have a rehearsal time, you have a dress rehearsal time, performance time. But what are other elements that you use to be able to craft this kind of full body performance?
Well, There's usually, I work with writers a lot on new pieces, so there's usually a long development period where I'll be with the writer. They'll send me a page, they'll send me a line, they'll send me a scene, they'll send me an act. We'll get together with actors, we'll talk about it, we'll think about it. I'll bring designers into the process. So I usually try and have like a night where I invite the set designer, the costume designer, the lighting designer, the sound designer, the projection designer, if there is one, to read the script. I find that if you're trying to create a whole image, a whole vision of a piece, you really need everybody to start literally on the same page. And so I frequently will make designers act for me, and we read the play out loud, and we drink coffee or have a bottle of wine or whatever, and talk about the play and talk about what is the story that we're telling. And then when we go into production, I think that there's a way in which you try all kinds of versions of scenes. So you could say, in this version, the given circumstances are X. Okay, well now let's try if the given circumstances are Y. How does that change the scene? If it's been 20 minutes since you just saw that character, okay, let's try it that it's been a year. So how does that change what the fabric and the texture of the scene is, and what feels more exciting? And sometimes what's funny on Sunday is not funny on Tuesday when you come back after a day off, and then you have to sort of change it up again. And I think being a director is about being able to be both flexible enough and also steady enough in your vision that you're able to accommodate both a very elastic collaboration with all kinds of people that you're working with, but also steady enough that what's going to contribute to the vision versus what's going to distract from it.
Yeah. And on your path, how have you maintained elastic and both precise? Because you've continued to hone your craft over and over, and it just seems to keep getting better and better.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know, and I don't know if you feel this way, but I think one of the things that's hardest about directing is that you actually need to practice it. And it's very hard to practice directing unless you get a lot of people. Yeah. So there's this weird kind of chicken and the egg where like you need people to practice what you're doing, but you need to know what you're doing in order to get the people. Right. So it's a process that I'm constantly learning about how to be a better director, and I think it's a lifelong process actually. And with every project, I find myself, I just was doing this solo show with the great Judith Light, and I feel like she was like a master class in acting, just sitting across from her and talking about that character. And now I'm in the middle of working on this giant musical, and I have the amazing good fortune of being in a third collaboration with Sutton Foster, and this is a whole another kind of directing, even though it's all sort of under the same umbrella, because we're reinventing and reimagining and relooking at one of the great musicals in our canon.
Yeah, Sweet Charity is what you're working on right now, yeah?
Yeah.
Tell me where are you attempting to reinvent this? Because it is such a classic story.
It is a classic story created by masters, you know, Bob Fosse, Neil Simon, Cy Coleman, and Dorothy Fields, who wrote the lyrics. And I mean, it's an extraordinary piece of theater. And Sutton called me a little over a year ago, and she said she wanted to do this part, to play the part of Sweet Charity, and she said, is it a show that you love? And I sort of went, I don't know. And then I
you love it.
Yeah, I know. Well, when Sutton calls you, you say yes no matter what. I'm not an idiot. And then I thought, well, I better get a good idea about this. And I really thought, why do we need to see it Sweet Charity now? Why in 2016? What can I bring to it? What do I feel like Sutton and I can bring to it? The great Josh Burgas is choreographing it, and he's a master of reinvention. And I think ultimately what I felt like was that the best way to tell this story right now is to really focus on it from a character and story point of view. And so we've really pared it down. We've made it from, traditionally that's done with 28 people, we're doing it with 12. We're focusing on story and character, keeping the heart and soul and comedy of that show, but also trying to reconcile what's traditionally been a paradox about that play, which is that there's a sense of Charity as the good-hearted optimist in the middle of a dark world of prostitution. And it's always, I think, been something that's been tricky in terms of reconciling how she's inside of this world, which is inside of the beautiful container of musical theater.
Right.
And so I feel like my challenge is to tell the story in a tonally sound way, and to also reinvent and take a really a new look at the material, because it was done perfectly. It was done perfectly by masters. So how Josh and I are able to come at it from a new place and to really focus on different things, because I think their virtue is that they had giant cast, there was big spectacle, and our virtue is going to be the kind of storytelling of it.
Yeah. And you go between, I think, traditional theater and musical theater. For you, what do those genres each bring? Like, what would a difference be in directing musical theater outside of that, but also in terms of engagement with an audience? How do you see that differing or touching?
Well, for me, the job is mostly the same, actually. It's how do you tell the story best? Whether it's one person or it's a giant room of people, whether it's for Broadway or off-Broadway or regional, I think my job remains what is the most exciting way to tell the story, what is the most interesting way to tell the story, how do I take an audience from the moment those lights start to go down to when they come up at the end, how do I take them on the exact journey that I want them to take them on? And that's sort of the same no matter what the type of show it is. It's just different because the number of people sometimes is exponentially bigger with a musical. So you have, in my room right now, I have a choreographer, an associate choreographer, I have a arranger and orchestrator, I have my music director, I have a band of 6 women. I mean, just the sheer numbers of people and personalities to corral is different. But the job itself is the same in essence.
Yeah, it's interesting. You seem to be drawn to, I think, reinvention, but also a little bit of these provocative and discursive approaches. Violet is such an incredible story about a young woman. What are you drawn to in terms of thematics?
I really am drawn to interesting, complicated women. So that's across the board.
Go.
Yeah, so that's, if there's an interesting story to be told, I always want to put whole, full women on stage who are both making all the right choices and also all the wrong choices. And in this play that I'm doing right now, All the Ways to Say I Love You with Judith Light, I mean, that is an incredibly complicated character. She is an unreliable narrator to her own life, which to me feels really interesting, because aren't we all unreliable narrators to our own life? And to watch someone unravel and realize, all these things I thought I was doing right, maybe I was wrong, and what that moment of reckoning is so interesting to me. And then a character like Charity, who goes from guy to guy, sabotaging herself kind of at every turn, and yet she keeps going. And so in a way, Charity is our every woman, and I'm interested in those kinds of women. I'm interested in stories of women who are struggling, and sometimes they overcome and sometimes they don't. Certainly in Violet, that was a story about trying to live with the scars that we all have, both real and imagined, emotional and literal.
Yeah. And how about your own path as a woman through this? Because you're one of the youngest directors, right, to have been so lauded, I think, and also a female director.
Yeah.
Do you think that your gender had any effect on how you came to be where you are? How has it felt to kind of walk in your shoes?
It's interesting. I mean, people ask me all the time about being a female director, and I'm always like, I love that question, because I love talking about gender parity, and I love talking about how important it is and what the struggles are. And I also feel, I mean, I'm sure you feel this way too. It's like there's also a way in which I'm like, no, I'm an artist, I'm a director, I'm this, and that there's a way in which I feel like the gender piece of it can be so limiting. Do you encounter that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm asking that question a lot.
Yeah.
Nearly every interview. And across the board, it seems to be that no one wants to be defined by their gender. But yet there are certain attributes that allow us to be in spaces where another gender cannot be. But even I think the idea of what it means to be female, because we're no longer really restricted to that, I think, in our own bodies.
Yeah.
And you addressing these characters too. I think on stage there's also a very easy reappropriation.
Oh, yeah.
But what does, that's something I'm thinking about a lot right now, what does female actually mean in today's day and age?
Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like when I was first, it was terrible. In my 20s, it was terrible. I lied about my age constantly. And
why?
Well, because I thought first of all, nobody cared what I thought anyway. But in particular, as a director, as the person in charge, as the person leading a room, as the captain, you want to feel like you're talking to somebody who knows something. And I think one of the main differences between young male directors and young female directors is that men can be looked at when they're younger and thought like, oh, he's a genius, he's a wunderkind, he's this, that, and the other thing. And I think women are looked at and they feel like, oh, they don't know anything. And actually, Jill Soloway said this incredible thing about how men are hired for their potential and women are hired for their experience. And that's something to me that I think, as I've gotten older, it's actually been easier to lead a room. I haven't had to work as hard. I haven't had to lie about my age. I was so relieved when I turned 30 and then relieved again when I turned 40 because I was like, this is like the piece of my job where people want to feel like I know what I'm doing. It gets easier as I get older. I don't have to work so hard at it, proving that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a uniquely female thing, actually. And I look at my assistants and other young directors coming up, and I'm so glad not to be there anymore, because what I actually feel like is not only am I better at my job, but I feel like I'm taken more seriously. I'm taken more seriously on first sight. And it used to be when I would be in an audition room, if there was a male casting director, people who came into audition would always look to the man in the room, and I'd be like, actually, I'm directing this. And it was always a very interesting moment where I think it's unconscious. People don't even realize that they look to the men in the room to lead. Yeah. And so more and more as I have the opportunity to, I like to have rooms that are very full of women. And for example, on Sweet Charity, I have an all-female band led by an all-female music department, which is just really exciting to me.
Yeah, this makes me wonder, because you're talking about experience and direction. Do those two things need to go hand in hand? Because when we're young and we want to be, many young people start out, I mean, you started out wanting to be a director. Yeah. Do you need experience to be a good director?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, there's talent, there's innate talent. Yeah. I think there's sort of three things in the recipe, I guess, which would be
good
luck.
Reappropriation.
Yes, I'm trying. I'm circling back. I feel like you need luck.
Yeah.
You need talent and skill, and you need to be able to know the people, to be able to, like, there's a kind of connection piece of it that's about the other humans that you know and the people that you want to work with. I feel like it's a very it's incestuous a little bit, a little nepotistic, but I feel like people get opportunities because of the people they know, or because writers see their work and want to work with them, or because they're people that you've developed relationships with. Like, there's that piece of it, and then there's the luck of you and your collaborators being in the right place at the right time, or an accident happening or something, and someone being able to look at you and say, like, yeah, you, like that moment of lightning. And then in that moment where the lightning strikes, you need to be able to do your job really well.
Yeah.
And so although I say to people, talent and skill and practice and craft is a lot of it, but you need those other two things. You need the right people to be in the room with you, and then you need the lightning to strike.
The little bit of serendipity that we all search for.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is an interesting recipe. It's kind of like that special garnish that somehow appears.
Yeah.
Yeah. You also playwright?
No, I did. I really, when I was in college, I went to Carnegie Mellon, and I really, really wanted to work on new plays. So I wanted to work with authors, and there was at that time no sort of cross-pollination between directors and playwrights. And so I actually applied to the playwriting program in some crazy moment of chutzpah or something, I don't know. And I was like, oh, I want to sit with writers, and I want to learn how to be a writer, so that I know how to talk to writers. And so I applied to the program, and I was actually a graduate playwright while I was at Carnegie Mellon, as well as an undergrad director. And so I felt like I learned more about directing in a way, while I was a playwright, because I was sat at a table with writers. I learned how to talk to writers, how to talk about story, character, plot. I mean, I really learned about script analysis in a way that I think has served me very well, particularly because most of the plays that I've directed in the last 20 years have been new plays in which I'm working with authors to help them with their vision and to make the plays. I take a very strong dramaturgical hand with the writers that I work with, and I feel confident in that, I think, because of the experience that I had when I was a writer myself, even though I now really know what good writing is because I've worked with some of the best, and I'm not a writer.
We need each other.
Yeah.
What kind of new plays do you want to see in American theater? It's a really interesting time for the craft, I think.
Yeah, I think theater is having an amazing moment right now for a couple of reasons. Partly the amazing advent of all the different TV shows that are on and the cable stations is that now playwrights are able to make more of a living because they're able to write for a television show and also write plays. And so I think it's allowing more amazing authors to continue to write plays as opposed to just like giving it up and moving in LA and working for a network show, which is what it used to be. And now they can stay in New York, they can keep their career, and they can write for a television show that, you know, has 10 episodes and then still have a play produced. So I think that's been a big contributor to why theater's in such an amazing moment right now. I think certainly Hamilton has had an amazing effect on everybody in the theater and probably most people in the country, if not the world, in terms of how we feel about theater, how important it can be. And I feel like the kind of theater that we need right now is a theater that is radically inclusive, that deals with all kinds of people's stories and is available and interesting to all kinds of people and at all kinds of ticket price levels. So accessibility is really important, and then you can't have accessibility and then tell the same stories we've always been telling. We need new stories written by people from all different walks of life, different cultures, different races. We need gender parity, and then we need to if those things are in place and then we make ticket prices affordable, then we create a situation where people want to go because they're seeing themselves reflected on stage and or they're seeing people that they've never seen before.
Yeah. Do you think that this means expanding the bounds of the theater? Because we're in this craze also of immersive and experiential theater.
Yeah.
And I'm so curious from your perspective, having been classically trained and now seeing this explosion, which is maybe also a bit of a return to the past and the present.
Yeah.
But what does that mean for the form for you? Does that create more access?
Sure. I mean, I think the more people who choose a live experience over staying home and watching Netflix, not that Netflix isn't awesome and I love Netflix, but anybody who's going to choose a live experience, no matter what it is, dance, theater, something in between, any kind of performance art. I mean, there are the more times that somebody chooses that and appreciates their choice and doesn't feel sort of punished by it or say like, oh, that was terrible or whatever, but feels in fact rewarded and enriched, whether they liked it or not, it doesn't matter. People being able to just make the choice to be in a live experience, like I think that's the goal.
Yeah. The human connection above all.
Yeah.
What else do you think you would be doing if you were not a theatrical director?
I think about it every day.
Really? What a good question.
It is a good question. I don't know. You know, directing is ephemeral in a certain way. It's mortal and it's ephemeral, so you can't always, even though I have a hand in every single decision that's made on the stage, from the color of the set to the type of clothing to a button on a shirt to a note of music to a line. I mean, I'm sort of everywhere and nowhere as the director. And so I think my fantasy about what else I would do, it would be so concrete. Like I'd really like to make cupcakes, you know, because then I could make the cupcake and then no matter how it turned out, I could point to it and I could hold it and I could say, I made this.
Yeah.
And I don't have any of that.
Oh, this is a perfect segue because I made you a wrap.
You did?
I did. A real physical wrap.
A rap?
So the show is
Okay.
rap. And so as a metaphor and also tangible
yes.
reality, every guest gets a rap. And so I'm collaborating with my friend Alicia Waters, who has a restaurant, Once Upon a Tart, down the street. And I read about your love of fish, specifically smoked fish, and then started to think about the context that you're working in, which is classic New York. So this is a bagel and lox.
Oh my
after
God.
we reinterpreted as wrap. So this is Leigh's salmon, cream cheese, capers, onion, lettuce wrap for you.
This is
from
like
us.
a Jewish dreams, Jewish girl dreams come true.
Jewish
A
girl
salmon,
dreams come
cream
true.
cheese, caper, onion, lettuce wrap. I mean, this is the best. This is the very best. Thank you so much.
May you enjoy it.
So let me ask you, as
Yeah.
somebody who makes tangible
goods. Yeah.
goods that you can hand, like, and also you do work that is much less tangible.
Yeah.
Where, like, how does that live in you?
You know, I think it goes back to that first question that we talked about. My duality in screenwriting and dance was definitely a need to have both ephemeral process and also really tangible physical process. I've always wanted both of those. Maybe it's the Libra in me that needs a bit of
Yeah.
balance,
Yeah.
but that kind of duality has always really helped me both dream but then also act. And I think that's what drew me to food, because it's such a primary and emotional material.
Yeah.
And when we start to weave storytelling into it, we can be kind of everywhere and
Yeah.
also inside and very, very tangible and very intimate with people.
Right.
Yeah, that's definitely what drew me to it.
Oh, that's so interesting. I think a lot about when people have to eat on stage, because
Oh,
everything means so much on stage,
Yeah.
right? Like a red dress isn't a red dress when it's on stage. It means something. Or a
Yeah.
white dress, you can't just put someone in white on stage because you read all these things into it. So I think a lot when I've had actors eat, or when the kind of food they're eating, how they eat, all those things, like, we learn so much about people. It tells a whole story. If someone is just constantly shoveling carrots into their mouth, or they're eating, if I'm trying to exhibit behavior, anxiety or stress, or comfort, I will frequently have people either preparing food or eating food, because I think it tells so much story.
So much so. Well, I always think of it as the muscle memory of our everyday. It's like circuit training for our behavior, because it's the one thing that we do regularly every single day. 3, 2, 1, 4, 5 times a day, depending on who we are.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting because it's this whole training of all of our senses, because food isn't just sight or taste, it's also sound. We hear when we eat, we smell. All of these things affect our perception of the world and our emotional and psychological state. So it's really, I think, a super powerful material. If only we could smell the salmon. Smell-o-vision still has yet to come.
I know. It smells really good though.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really
Thanks for my
enjoyed
wrap.
chatting with you. Yeah, enjoy the wrap.
Oh, we'll love it.
And we are back this Thursday at 1 p.m. live from the DKNY store at 420 West Broadway. My name is Emily Valtz, and it's been a pleasure to chat with Leigh Silverman today. Thanks.
Thank you.